Euphrasie Barbier. Chapter 9, 1873, The Islands. The sisters in Tonga lived in a large, neat timber cottage, which had been brought complete from Sydney by the bishop himself. This house was the pride and joy of the local people. It was the best building on the islands, and they considered it the glory of their mission. Set in a tropical paradise of gardens and fruit trees, it seemed to be a perfect reflection of the faith and devotion of the missionaries and their eager converts. One day, disaster struck Tonga. A hurricane, ripping through the Pacific, left a path of destruction behind it. For hours the terrified population huddled wherever they could find shelter. When at last the storm blew itself out, and they emerged from their hiding places, they stood aghast. The village was gone. The trees were torn out or stripped bare of fruit and leaves. The gardens were shredded, and the whole island was strewn with wreckage and mangled vegetation. Worst of all, the precious mission house, so strong and beautiful, had been completely overturned by the wind and shaken to pieces. In the lee of the island, a French warship had safely ridden out the storm. A group of officers came ashore to see what help the local people needed. "The sisters' house! The sisters' house!" the sorrowing villagers cried, and they took them to see the disaster. Within a couple of hours, a team of seamen arrived. Under the skilled direction of the ship's carpenter, islanders and sailors worked together. Many willing hands dragged at the battered timbers and pulled the hulk back to its right place. The ship's carpenter insisted that this time firm deep piles be set into the earth to anchor the frame of the house. The sailors worked briskly and cheerfully, enjoying the unexpected break from harsh navy discipline and the boredom of their long tour of duty. Within days, the cottage was standing upright again. When the damage had been neatly patched up, everyone agreed that the house was now better and stronger than ever. While the men were rebuilding the village, every spare hand, from the sisters down to the smallest child, was out of doors sifting through the debris scattered all over the island. Scraping through the mounds of sodden rubbish and rotting vegetation, they found treasures, pots and dishes, clothing, blankets, pieces of furniture. As the mounds of discarded waste grew, so did the pile of valuables. Washed and cleaned and dried in the bright sunshine, they were laid out ready to be reclaimed by their owners. "Let's set the house and school to rights immediately," the sisters said, "and then we'll work on the garden. Reverend Mother is in New Zealand. She could arrive here any day. How will she know what our mission is like if we don't have it in working order?" They decided to rearrange some of the rooms in the convent and prepared the largest and airiest for their long-awaited visitor. "She is not used to the tropics as we are," they said. "The hottest season will soon be upon us. This room looks out to the garden and the beach. The fresh air will keep her comfortable and healthy." Mother Augustine was in charge, but every sister helped as eagerly. Their Tongan friends were almost as impatient as the sisters. "When will she come, the Holy Mother of all the sisters?" they kept asking. At last everything was ready. The house was spotless, the garden blooming again, the school spick and span, and the children primed for their best performances. It seemed a pity to disturb the perfect polish by doing everyday work, but work had to go on while they waited. Days went by, and then weeks, and still they waited. Everyone cleaned and polished and practiced anew, again and again and again, each time with a little less enthusiasm. One warm, dull day when the rain was falling in torrents, a ship came into the harbour almost unseen. Bare feet paddled down to the jetty to investigate. They came racing back at top speed. "Sisters! Sisters! There are sisters coming! There are sisters on the boat!" Mother Augustine and her sisters flung cloaks over their heads and hurried through the rain to the waterfront. From the beach they could see two small black figures on the deck, but they could not distinguish them through the rain. At the first gap in the straggling line of porters and sailors, the sisters darted up the gangplank and onto the deck. And in the shelter of the deck house there they were, not two but three sisters, two standing, waving and smiling, and the third a tiny figure, struggling to stand, beaming and holding out her arms to them. Euphrasie hugged them all, but she could hardly keep to her feet. As she sank back onto her chair, one of the visitors said gently, "Mother is not ready to walk just yet. We'd better wait." The island sisters were shocked. They had never expected to find Euphrasie so frail and weak. Young Sister Mary of Jesus stepped forward. She had always claimed to be as strong as an ox. "I'll help, Reverend Mother," she said. "You bring all the luggage. Let's go now, quickly, while the rain has eased a bit. Just lean on my shoulder, Reverend Mother." And she flung her arms around the little Mother General in a bear hug. Up went Euphrasie over Sister Mary's shoulder as though she were a small child. Before anyone had time to gasp, Sister Mary was striding across the deck and down the gangplank with the little figure bundled over her shoulder. The others seized the pieces of luggage and scurried after them. As Sister Mary and her burden reached the porch, the others caught up with them in time to open the door. Sister Mary put Euphrasie down in the guest room and gently lowered her into the best chair. "Welcome to Tonga, Reverend Mother," she said, blushing now at her own boldness. She noticed Euphrasie's pallor and the dark rings under her eyes, but the little Reverend Mother was chuckling. "That was a quick trip, a very quick trip, thank you, sisters," she said. Blushing ever more, Sister Mary hurried out to the kitchen to put on the kettle. The others followed her, all except Mother Augustine, who was having a whispered consultation with Euphrasie. As the others left the room, she closed the door behind them. "I think Mother Augustine will help Reverend Mother General into bed," someone said, and they all agreed that it was the most sensible thing to do right now. That evening went quickly. Euphrasie wanted no more than a hot drink before she went to sleep. The other visitors retired early too, after a quick look around their new home. Early the next morning, a crowd of visitors arrived to greet the sisters' mother. Some were very important local dignitaries. This was to be a ceremonial welcome to a distinguished guest, and these good people had come from all over the island. But the guest was still lying in a feverish sleep. Mother Augustine was frantically worried. She was mortally afraid of breaking native protocol. In the end, she decided to be completely frank. "Reverend Mother General is here. She longs to greet you all, but I must tell you that she is dangerously ill, and I have confined her to bed until it is safe for her to rise," she said. The good-hearted Tongans responded with their natural warmth and kindness. All concerned, they hurried off to find gifts suitable for a cherished invalid. At low tide, the school children asked to be allowed to go down to the shore for their play interval. They wanted to search for a special shellfish, the greatest delicacy they knew, to tempt an ailing appetite. Within days, Euphrasie was on her feet again, and involved in meeting people, seeing the sisters' works and their surroundings, and, most importantly of all, talking to them about their spiritual needs and longings. The weeks passed happily for the mission sisters and their 3 guests, but all too soon came time for Euphrasie to move on, this time to visit the sisters in Samoa. Aboard ship once more to continue her visitations, Euphrasie found the sea as unfriendly as ever, but this time threatening her life in a new way. The danger came so suddenly that the sisters scarcely had time to be afraid. As the ship threaded its way through coral reefs, a sudden squall sent officers and sailors into emergency action. The ship shuddered and seemed to swing out of control. There was a distinct sensation of grating and grinding upon something hard and solid. The captain was shrieking orders above the wind. The men were scrambling and swearing and groaning with effort. The sisters cowered out of the way in the lee of the deckhouse. The men struggling with the wheel gave a despairing yell as the ship gave a sudden lurch and slid sideways into a great trough of rushing water. "It is the end," Euphrasie thought. She felt calm, beyond panic, strangely detached at the inevitability of death. She seemed to be making the sign of the cross over herself, but her hands never left the rail they were gripping. A mountain of water was rising high above the ship. Euphrasie gasped and closed her eyes as death swung down upon them. The ship leapt to its doom. Then there was a great shout, and Euphrasie opened her eyes. The ship was now riding smoothly on the crest of a great wave. A friendly sailor paused for a moment as he hurried by. "Say your prayers again, sisters," he said. "Thank God for us this time. That was a close shave, but now we are safe. We have cleared the reefs." The crew sailed on in the best of spirits, and Euphrasie settled down to the usual misery of seafaring. At their first Samoan stop, there was a poor little Catholic mission with a church but no resident priest. The local catechist greeted the sisters shyly. He showed them around the mission property and took them to the church, the only building. He did not know what else to do with such strange and sacred visitors. The sisters themselves decided to camp in the empty church that night. "Let's be real missionaries," they said. "Let's live gratefully with the simple things God gives us, and let us do it for love of Him." With the help of their overawed host, they made themselves a fire outside the church that evening and cooked yams in a borrowed pot. With their bare fingers, they slowly ate the hot yams and a few slices of cold meat the ship's cook had given them that morning for a picnic lunch. Before darkness fell, they said their evening prayers together in the church. Wrapping themselves in their large travelling mantles, they finally lay down on the altar steps for the night, with their heads pillowed on their small black serge handbags. They smiled at each other in the half-light, and then tried not to catch each other's eyes again. They wanted to giggle like schoolgirls at their comical situation, but at the same time they were moved by the strange solemnity of the occasion. "We are missionaries. This is missionary life," they were all thinking. Inside, they were as excited as children enjoying a new adventure, hard though the wooden steps were under their tired bones. At another island stop, they met an old missionary who had lived for many years as a hermit. He had a reputation for extreme eccentricity, but Euphrasie enjoyed talking to him. "Yes, he is a strange man in some ways," she reported to the others later, "but I'm sure he's one of God's great saints. He lives on next to nothing, mostly on fruit which grows wild around his hut, and he gives away everything which people give him. He is so kind to everyone, even to the people who openly ridicule him. He gives lessons to anyone who wants to learn. Above all, he prays. How he prays! He lives so close to our Lord. He says he could not live here without the Blessed Sacrament in his little chapel." The old missionary was equally pleased to meet Euphrasie. "Ah, Mother Mary, what about some sisters for our island here? I'm an old man now. I won't be here much longer, and there is so much to do." He insisted on taking Euphrasie to meet one of the local chiefs, who promised to give land for a school and gardens if the sisters should ever come to this island. As they sailed away, Euphrasie was strangely moved. She could not get the old missionary out of her mind, nor the mystery of such a life. To pray, to be, she thought. To pray, to be. It was like a rush of truth, of reality, right through her being, a call or an echo of something she had sensed all her life, but could never put into comprehensible words. A few more days at sea brought the sisters to Upolu, the main island of Samoa. As the ship entered the port of Apia, they could see the tall spire of Bishop Eloy's church, shining white against the dark green hills behind the town. Excited, they leaned on the ship's rail, gazing at the approaching town and jetty. There was no sign of any sister waiting among the small crowd on the shore. "That's not surprising, of course," said Euphrasie. "They don't live near the coast, so they would not have seen our ship come in. We must go to find them." As soon as the ship tied up, they picked up their bags and set off along the sandy track leading inland. The sisters at the mission had been waiting a long time, but this day no one had told them that a ship was expected. They were going about their usual household tasks when one of them glanced down the road and noticed 3 strange sisters approaching. She stared for a moment and then shrieked, "She's here! Our mother is here!" They all dropped brooms and buckets and baskets where they were and ran down the path to meet their visitors. Oh, mother, you've come, you've come!" They laughed and wept with joy. Euphrasie hugged each one to her. "And Sister Vincent, how is she?" she asked, looking around among them. "Oh, mother, she is gone. She is dead," they replied. "She so wanted to see you, but she could not wait. She died 2 months ago. Such a holy death. We'll tell you all about it." They took the visitors inside out of the hot sun and plied them with cool drinks. There was so much to say and see and do. There was even a pile of mail from the mother house, now many months old, but fresh news to Euphrasie and her companions. Euphrasie was disappointed to find that she had also missed Bishop Eloy, who was away in Sydney and not expected back for many weeks. She thought of old Sister Mary of Carmel on Fortuna, still waiting to see her. As soon as a ship was available, she and her companions set out. Again she was too late. At Fortuna she could only pray at the old missionary's grave and visit the little hut where she had lived and worked so long. Altogether, Sister Carmel had given 27 years of her life to the island missions. Deep in thought, Euphrasie and her friends walked on to visit the grave of Fortuna's first missionary, a Marist father named Peter Chanel. This man had worked without the slightest success in his mission until the day he was hacked to death by a native to whom he was doing a kindness. Now, barely 30 years later, the whole island was devoutly Catholic. Deeply moved, Euphrasie and her companions knelt long and thoughtfully in the martyr's shabby little hut, now a tiny chapel with its altar on the very spot where Peter Chanel had bled to death. Awed and inspired, they were reluctant to tear themselves away from such sacred surroundings. They had no idea of the test in store for them that very day. Earlier that morning, at some distance from the mission, a European trader, an unscrupulous rogue, had killed a native in a particularly nasty quarrel. The local people had promptly dealt with the criminal, executing him in accordance with the tribal law, privileged though he was by race and wealth. Still shouting and brandishing their spears, they were carrying his mangled body past the mission when their chief saw that the sisters had arrived. He ran up to the little house and battered at the door. Shaking his spear and rolling his eyes, he shouted and gesticulated at the visitors. They could not understand a word of his tirade, but they were convinced that the natives had come for their blood. "Let us die like Christians," cried Euphrasie, and together they knelt for the fatal blow, bravely trying to offer their martyrdom for these poor lost savages. It never occurred to the terrified sisters that these normally devout natives might be passionately telling them the story of their recent grievances and explaining that justice had been done at last. To the islanders, it seems, the sisters' horrified faces as they fell to their knees were evidence of their sympathy and sorrow at the harrowing tale, and their prayers a comfort and support to good people so ill-used. The sisters never did hear the full story behind their adventure. They knew only that their apparent persecutors suddenly turned away to leave them in peace. Euphrasie later spoke of the incident as an example of the power of prayer. Who made them turn away in shame? Who made them drop their spears at the very moment of our slaughter? She would say. She was confirmed once more in her trust in prayer. The natives of Fortuna were equally convinced of the Church's love and sympathy for them in their wrongs and pain, and their love for all the sisters was unshakable from that day. Returning to Apia, Euphrasie gathered all the sisters from the island missions for a retreat preached by Bishop Eloy. It was a time of blessed peace for everyone. The retreat ended with the clothing of 2 Tongan novices and the opening of a novitiate at Apia. Afterwards, the professed sisters held a chapter where they discussed and prayed over their new constitutions. However, their spiritual life was not the only topic under discussion. The sisters also pooled all their experience and knowledge to draw up guidelines for the running of their schools. They planned fundraising efforts, outlined the responsibility of teachers and supervisors in and out of school hours, and wrote out a syllabus of instruction for every subject in every class. The education they wanted for the mission schools was not merely basic. It was to be the very best they could devise for the needs of the local children. Bishop Eloy and Mother Mary together drew up an official agreement listing the respective responsibilities of the diocese and of the congregation in the support of the sisters and their works. It was agreed that the mission would provide an adequate house for the sisters, suitably cloistered, with a chapel, an enclosed garden, and a separate building for the school and any other works in which they were involved. Euphrasie was delighted with the bishop's unfailing kindness. As she moved from mission to mission, Euphrasie was amused and charmed by the simplicity of life in the islands. She wrote regularly to the mother house, telling the sisters at home of the interesting things she was learning in this new part of the world. She was enormously impressed the first time she saw a downpour of heavy, warm, tropical rain, and then she laughed with delight to see the school children race out into the yard to frolic and dance in the drenching water while they washed themselves from head to toe. The sisters, she noted, ran out just as fast to put out all the spare basins and tubs to catch the pure, fresh rainwater. How hard the sisters work, how little they have, and yet they, the children, the house, and the school, are kept spotlessly clean, she wrote back to the mother house. Euphrasie loved to see how the island communities celebrated their faith. She had never before seen the pit ovens used by Polynesians. She marvelled at the hours of preparation, digging out the pits, lining them with large stones, filling them with firewood, tending the great fire, sweeping the ashes from the red-hot stones, and collecting large, fresh green leaves for wrapping and covering the food while it baked. She was astonished at the enormous quantities of food being prepared. At Wallace alone, more than 100 teenagers made an 8-day retreat in preparation for their first Holy Communion, and on the great day some 4,000 of their older relatives gathered to celebrate the occasion, first by receiving the sacraments themselves, and then by preparing a magnificent feast for the whole population. "It is like something out of the Bible," Euphrasie marvelled. "It is the feeding of the multitude, the sharing of their goods, the one heart and one mind of the early church. To think that such a thing can happen even in our day." Bishop Eloy, too, was very happy with the sisters' work. "There is only one more thing I could ask of you, Reverend Mother," he said. "Please send us more sisters." Meanwhile, in all the convents, alterations were being done to make it easier to keep the spirit of the constitutions. A wall or high fence around the sisters' area was the first need, and then the closing off of some parts of the house to give some privacy for a cloister. In some places the walls and fences were being made of branches and leaves, neatly woven together, and the rooms were divided by calico walls. A cloister built of leaves and calico. I wonder what church officials in Rome would think of that, Euphrasie thought, smiling to herself. But what does it matter if it fills our need? The sisters themselves are keen to live up to the highest standards of religious life. She knew that soon she would have to return to the mother house. Before she left the Pacific, she wanted to see each sister able to live close to God in prayerful withdrawal as well as active work. There were a few, she felt, who might have some doubts about the practical aspects of the new lifestyle. Once they had experienced it for themselves, she was sure, they would find their cloister a haven of strength and peace and love. The days were busy and rewarding, but one night Euphrasie had a peculiarly vivid and distressing dream. She seemed to be with her dear friend, Mother Mary of the Blessed Sacrament, whom she had left in charge of the mother house. Euphrasie did not hear precise words, if there were words at all, but she knew what her dream visitor was saying. I am dead, I have gone, but you, such trouble you will have. You have lost the islands, you have lost the islands. Euphrasie woke from the dream acutely distressed. She could not put it from her mind, and there was no one she could confide in. What did such a dream mean, anyway? Can she be dead? Is she really dead? She thought. I can only wait for news from the mother house, but I feel that it is true. I know she has not been well for some time. I fear that she really is dead, and I shall never see her again. But the islands? What does that mean? How can I lose the islands when everything is going so well here? She prayed and she grieved secretly. There was nothing else she could say or do. Before leaving the islands, Euphrasie made a last visit to the mission stations. She was looking forward to seeing all the sisters once more before setting off on the long trip back to Europe. They are so good, she said to herself. By now they will have adapted well to the new constitutions. I can go away knowing that they are settled and growing together in peace and happiness. On her return to Samoa, she was a little taken aback on meeting Sister Mary Misericordia, who had earlier been her guide on the first trip around the islands. She was in charge of the Samoan mission, but now she greeted Euphrasie curtly and coldly. Showing a surliness of manner which Euphrasie had never seen in her before, she stumped off sulkily, leaving the visitor to fend for herself. Even greater was Euphrasie's surprise to find that while the planned partitions and fences had all been built to form a cloister, in fact life had changed not at all. There was no privacy anywhere in the convent, and people trotted through, laughing and talking noisily at all hours of the day and night. It was all very friendly and informal, but there was none of the atmosphere of prayer and peacefulness which they had all agreed was necessary in nourishing their spiritual lives. I must be tactful, I must be prudent, Euphrasie said to herself, biting her tongue. Sister Mary Misericordia is one of the pioneers, and she has been a wonderful missionary all these years. It is not her fault that she has never lived in a regular convent or trained in a proper novitiate. I must make allowances for her lack of understanding. But Euphrasie soon found that she had underestimated the problem. Sister Mary Misericordiae not only failed to see the importance of constitutions at all, in Euphrasie's absence she had been openly ridiculing the new set-up. "Newfangled nonsense," she said. "We ran a good mission before she came along. What does she know of mission life? All these rules and regulations and walls and doors and cloisters. They're going to ruin our work. Our schools will never survive. It will be a disaster. Our mission will be finished." Bishop Eloy was startled, and then he was won over by his old friend's arguments. "No, Reverend Mother," he said to Euphrasie one day, "we must go back to our original arrangements. If you really cannot accept that, then I ask you to take your sisters elsewhere." Euphrasie was astonished. The bishop had never before found fault with the idea of cloister. In fact, it was the Marist fathers who had first won her over to its value. When she had explained the constitutions, the sisters had seemed to accept them wholeheartedly, and even Sister Mary Misericordia had raised no word of objection. She realized now that she had miscalculated badly when she had left the Samoan mission in the charge of a sister who was wearing the habit, but had no experience or appreciation of regular convent life. Now it was almost time for her to return to Europe. "I'll write to the mothers of the General Council," she decided. "There is no more I can do now but make one last trip to Tonga and then on to New Zealand." The sisters at Tonga were desperately poor at this time, but their spirit was wonderful. Euphrasie even had a chance to make a retreat with them before she left. She felt it a time of special graces, and spent much of the retreat thinking about death, her own death, and the need to prepare for it. All her life she had been trying to live for God. Self-denial, overwork, disappointments, griefs, and physical suffering for the sake of His work had been her daily life for years. Now she realized in a new way that she must learn to trust Him completely, to leave things in His care, to wait for God, to receive peacefully and trustfully everything He would send. In other words, to abandon herself completely to His love and His plans. To be still and helpless as an act of trust would not be easy for her, she realized. By nature she was a woman always ready to work and fight for what she believed was right. Back in New Zealand, Euphrasie found the sisters well and cheerful, and eager to show her how wholeheartedly they were keeping their new rules, in spite of some opposition and ridicule from the clergy. They were delighted, too, when she noticed that since her first arrival in New Zealand, the number of sisters had more than doubled, as had the children in the schools. It was a joy to Euphrasie to see such progress, but this final visit had its disappointments too. Just when she wanted to spend every available moment with her sisters, she was laid low with a serious illness, confined to bed for a whole month in Napier. She was so ill that for most of that time she had to ask Mother Jude to answer her most important and urgent correspondence. And there was much to write about. Euphrasie was trying to keep regular contact with the sisters in the islands. Wallace and Fortuna were in a desperate plight, ravaged by tribal warfare and by smallpox. Urged by her concern, the sisters in New Zealand skimped and scraped to send money, clothing, and food. Euphrasie was particularly worried about the elderly and sick sisters. Whenever she could, she wrote personally to advise and encourage the island sisters in their hard times. They were to take particular care of Sister Mary de la Pitié, she wrote, as tenderly as though she were their own aged mother, and she, like a fond grandmother, was to be patient and loving with the younger sisters. Now that she was old and frail, worn out by a lifetime as a pioneer, nothing was to be asked of her beyond what she already loved doing: teaching the smallest children to pray, caring for the flowers in the garden and chapel, and tending the small livestock she cherished, the hens and chicks, the rabbits and cats, provided, of course, that her little feathered and furry friends did not make the sisters' dining room their own. Euphrasie well knew the characters of all the sisters, and remembered little details of their interests and problems. If she had not time or strength to write a small personal note from time to time, she would ask one of her most trusted assistants to do it for her, sometimes at her dictation, and often she scribbled a brief message at the end. "My dear, I am very concerned about you. Give them my love too. Remember me to your brother. I am praying for you. Let me know how things are with your sick sister and her children." The sisters' families were precious to Euphrasie. Many times she gave real practical assistance to the sisters' relatives: foster care for the children of a widowed sister taken ill, free education for the children of a ruined brother, a pious young sister in France who resolved to give up all contact with her natural family as an act of self-sacrifice, received a gentle but firm reproof. "I understand your desire to sacrifice to our Lord all that you hold most dear in the world, but please write to your brother as soon as possible. By all means practice holy detachment for the sake of our Lord, but in future please write to him more often." As soon as she was back on her feet again, Euphrasie hurried to Christchurch. While all was going so well in New Zealand, she considered it a good time to have a chapter, and she invited all sisters in positions of responsibility to come to Christchurch for Christmas. The happy festival was followed by clothing and profession ceremonies. Then followed 4 profitable days of discussing community life, the responsibilities of those in charge, the values represented in the rules and customs of the congregation, and the qualities of sound Christian education. At the end of the chapter, a report of their decisions was to be sent to the Mother House, and all present promised fervently to cherish the rule and constitutions as approved by the Church. Though immensely cheered by the good spirit of the New Zealand sisters, the Reverend Mother General was tired out and had to take to her bed again. This was a sore trial to her patience when she felt she had so little time left in the country. Hurrying on to Nelson as soon as she was on her feet again, Euphrasie took another chill and had a severe relapse of bronchitis. This time she was nursed by the same Sister Mary Michael who had seemed to be dying at her first visit. When the time came for Euphrasie to leave each house for the last time, the sisters wept unashamedly, each thinking to herself, "How can we ever hope to see her again? How frail and old she looks now, and within a few days she is to set off to the other side of the world. We shall never see her again in this life." As the sisters kissed her goodbye, Euphrasie too thought that her heart would break. How she loved these friends, old and new, who shared in all her hopes and dreams. She gazed at each kind, sad face, her own heart crying within her, Shall I ever see you again this side of heaven?